Hi, welcome to part 2 of the Cisco's model-driven telemetry series. In this video, we're going to focus on initializing the TIG stack on an Ubuntu virtual machine, and then we're going to switch gears and then send the data from an iOS XE device to the newly initialized TIG stack, and then we're going to visualize the data on Grafana platform. So let's dive right in. But before we go into the practical part of it, let's see the agenda or the steps involved in initializing the data flow. So as we saw in the previous video, the MDT capable network device, in this case, it's going to be an iOS XE device. It's going to send the data to a collector or receiver. In this demo, it's going to be Telegraf, which is a product of Influx company, and the Telegraf plugin basically is going to parse and collect the data, and then it's going to write the data onto the Influx time series database. So the database, the third box in our case, is going to be the InfluxDB. And finally, we're going to analyze the data on Grafana platform, which is again an open source platform. So this is going to be our open source stack for consuming the MDT data. So what are the steps involved in initializing the entire TIG stack? So first, we're going to get us a nice and clean Ubuntu virtual machine. So for this demo, I'm going to initialize that machine in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And then we're going to go ahead and install InfluxDB onto the virtual machine. And we are going to then focus our efforts on installing Telegraf, which is again the receiver for this particular stack. And then we're going to install Grafana, which is the visualization platform. And then we're going to follow by sending the data from iOS XE device. We are going to utilize the Cisco's DevNet platform to send the data. And then we're going to complete the demo by visualizing the data on Influx platform. And then we're going to get the queries and then use those queries on Grafana to complete our entire setup. So let's dive right in. So this here is the tool for creating the instances in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So I'm going to go ahead and create an instance for this demo. So what the image that we would want is an Ubuntu virtual machine. So I'm going to select the Ubuntu image for our virtual machine. So once that is done, I'll leave all other settings to the default. So I think an VM standard E2 1 micro is the capacity or the shape that is eligible for the always free tier. So we can go ahead and test our TIG stack in this always free eligible virtual machine. So for those of you who have already who are already familiar with cloud instances, I think this would be nothing new. But for beginners, Oracle Cloud especially asks you to upload a public and a private key pair so that you can SSH into the virtual machine. So in this case, I'm going to utilize my already existing public private key pair, and then I'm going to paste those public keys here. So let me go ahead and do that, and I'll fast forward the video a bit when I do that. I'm done pasting the public key, so let me go ahead and create this particular virtual machine. So what this would do is create an instance and load the Ubuntu virtual machine on that instance, then it would give us a public IP through which we can access this virtual machine. So once that is done, we can go ahead and SSH onto this newly created virtual machine, and then we can take it from there. So the public IP address that Oracle Cloud has given us in this case is 129.154.41.78. So let me go ahead and copy that, and let me try SSHing into the machine. So yeah, so that took a few minutes. Now we have got the access to the particular Ubuntu instance. So let us start our TIG installation journey. But before we do that, let me do some upgrades. So let's key in sudo apt update to update the repositories. I think that's a good practice before we go ahead and install the TIG stack itself. So after all that updates, now we have a brand new Ubuntu instance ready for our work. So now we can go ahead and install the InfluxDB onto our newly created Ubuntu machine. So the way we can do that is to directly follow the Influx install guide. So in order to get the latest version of Influx, we can go ahead and go to this page wherein the details of how do we install it is very clear in this. So let me do a wget of the GPG keys, and then I can go ahead and install the InfluxDB 2. The latest version is 2.3.0. So let me do that in the newly created virtual machine. So let this get complete. I'll fast forward, and we'll meet within a few seconds. So there you go. The Influx DB has been installed. So let's go ahead and complete. So now we have completed the number one step. Now we can go ahead and start the instance, the Influx DB service. So let's do that. So we'll wait for the service to start. Now it has been started. So we can check whether the InfluxDB is live and running by, yeah, so it's active, right? So we, as we know, the InfluxDB, the default instance of InfluxDB is open on port 8086. So, since it's an Oracle given Ubuntu instance, we have the IP tables enabled. So let me go ahead and open the port 8086 in the IP tables. So that will help us, accessing the web page of InfluxDB, so that we can go ahead and access the web page and do the initial configuration. So I have opened port 8086. So, and also since it's a cloud-based VM, so I should go ahead and open port 8086 in the subnet, which is attached to this VM. So let me double check whether that particular port is open. So we can check that in the subnet. So we have a default security list. So as you can see, I have already enabled 8086. So let's go back to the instances. So we need to get the public IP of this particular VM. So I'll do a copy, and then let me go ahead and open port 8086. So this should land us in the starting page of InfluxDB, wherein we can. So once the InfluxDB is up, this is the first screen that we would see. So let's, as the icon says, let's get started. So these are all the parameters that we should key in for setting up the initial user. So I'm going to choose admin, and I'm going to select a password of my choice, and I'm going to key in the same password once again. So there are two important parameters that we need to key in. One is the initial organization name. So in this case, I'm going to just give test as the organization name, and I'm going to select the bucket name as test. So let me go ahead and minimize the screen so that we can see the continue button. So once this is done, we are done configuring. So the InfluxDB has one organization, one user, and one bucket. So let's take a quick look into the steps and agenda. So we have initialized the Ubuntu virtual machine, and we have also installed InfluxDB on top of it. So the next component that we're going to install is the Telegraf. So that would be the next step. So we can go into the Telegraf documentation. So in order to download the Telegraf plugin, so let's go to the same download page, and instead of InfluxDB 2.3.0, we are going to now choose the Telegraf open source data collector. So the platform that we are looking for is the Ubuntu and Debian. So we have the same, sort of steps wherein we are going to install those keys, and then we are going to install Telegraf. So we'll copy this and then go back to our virtual machine instance in the cloud. So we are going to apply this commands. So let me fast forward this video a bit. We'll come back once the Telegraf instance is installed and complete. So now we have got the Telegraf instance installed. It's complete. So let's how do we actually configure it? So to give you a little bit of introduction, so as and when we have installed Telegraf, we can go into the etc Telegraf folder, and this is where we would find all the relevant Telegraf configurations, right? So when we're going to configure the receiver part, so this is where we would come and edit the Telegraf configuration file. So for the configuration that we are looking at in this particular video, we want to initialize the Telegraf for Cisco's MDT. So the Telegraf configuration file is where we would say, say for example, okay, this is the port that you should start listening on, so that you can get the data that we would send from the iOS XE device. So that is the telegraf.conf file is the location where we would configure it. So let's take a look at the present configuration file. So there would be a instance of configuration file here, so we can have a look at it here. And so this is an example configuration file, so we need not use this as it is. So we'll be modifying this configuration file in order to suit our requirements. So at the next part of this video, so we'll take a look into how we can configure the Telegraf instance. So this is where we are right now. So we have installed InfluxDB and Telegraf. So the next step would be to install Grafana. So let's take a look at how we can install Grafana, right? So let's come back to the documentation. So this is the page wherein we get the details of how to install Grafana on Debian based or Ubuntu based virtual machine. So in order to install the latest edition, so the one that we are looking for is the OSS, the open source version. So we are going to install these keys so that we can then install Grafana. So let me go ahead and copy these commands so that we have the relevant keys, and let's update the repository as well. So once this is done, we can go ahead and issue the commands for basically we would want the stable version of Grafana. So I'm choosing this repository. We can add this repository through this command, and once we have done that, we need to update our repository using the sudo apt-get update command, and then we can go ahead and install Grafana. So let us take a pause here. Let's wait for the installation to complete. When we come back, we would have installed Grafana. So the three components, that is Telegraf, Influx and Grafana, we have installed them all. So in the next part, we'll take a look into how we can configure it quickly so that we can start sending our first data stream from our iOS XE device, and we can visualize that on our TIG stack. Coming back to the agenda slide, we are at this stage wherein we have installed Grafana, and then we're going to now configure the Telegraf instance. But before we configure this Telegraf plugin, we need to do some basic settings on our Influx database. So if we come to the home page and choose the sources sort of page, we have certain tabs here. The one that we are interested in is to basically generate an API token. So API tokens are the way we can integrate external applications with InfluxDB. So Telegraf can also interface with our Influx database like an external application. So we need to generate an API token for our Telegraf instance. So I would be using an all access API token. So I'm going to basically name this token Telegraf, and then when I click save, so I have basically generated an Telegraf API token. So let me copy this API token. So this we would need when we are building the configuration for the Telegraf. So let me go ahead and show you the basic configuration that we. So here I am in the Visual Studio Code. So basically we are trying to build the Telegraf configuration. So any typical Telegraf configuration, you would see sort of two different areas. One called the inputs area, and the other is the outputs area. So in the inputs column, we are going to basically tell that the transport that we are going to use is gRPC. We are going to make the Telegraf instance listen on port number 57500. So these are the basic settings that would be required in the inputs tab. And in the outputs, there are some basic configuration. So the URLs point to the InfluxDB URL. So in this case, I've just used the IP address, the public IP address, followed by 8086. So that is the port number the InfluxDB is listening on. And the API token is the token that we generated, from the Influx UI. So there are better ways to do it. Basically, you can use environment variables and then for use it for better security. But since it's this tutorial is a basic, sort of just to give you an overview, we are directly pasting the API token that we have generated in the last step in this configuration file, and two more parameters that we would require. One is the organization, so we have named the organization test in the last step, and the bucket that we are interested in right now is the test. So these are the sort of basic settings that you would require in order to get going. So let me copy this entire configuration file, and then let's go ahead and configure the Telegraf instance in the Ubuntu VM. So as I said earlier, the location for this is in etc Telegraf folder. So we can basically remove the existing configuration file in Toto. So we have deleted the file. So let me start a new file called telegraf.conf. Okay, so I need the sudo permission for this. So we need to open the nano program, and then we can copy the configuration basically that we have built in VS Code. So I'm going to go ahead and copy it. Press, and then write it. So since done all these steps, we'll go ahead and start the Telegraf instance. So let me copy the command and then start it. So this should basically configure the Telegraf instance, and the machine should be basically now be ready to listen on port 57,500. So we also need to enable that port in port 57,500 in the IP tables. So let me go ahead and modify the IP table rule so that the Ubuntu instance can start receiving traffic on port 57,500. So now this is a stage wherein the Telegraf instance is up and running and it's ready to receive the traffic on gRPC TCP on port 57,500. So what we're going to do now is to basically go to the Cisco always on instance of Sandbox, and then we are going to start sending the data. So meet you there. So now we are going to go ahead and log in to the iOS XE always on Sandbox. So from there we are going to utilize the Cisco CLI to configure model-driven telemetry, and we are going to send the model-driven telemetry data to the Telegraf instance that we have initialized on our Ubuntu VM. So let me go ahead and log in the iOS XE always on Sandbox. So here we are. So we can go ahead and now and configure the always on instance to send the data. So what are all the commands that we would need? So these are the basic set of commands. So as we saw earlier, we are going to start a subscription named 101. We are going to utilize the KVGPB or the Google protocol buffers as the protocol for encoding. I shouldn't call it protocol, but it is the thing that we're going to use for encoding the data. And the filter basically says what is the data that we are going to ship from this network device onto our Telegraf instance. We are going to use the push-based mechanism. We are going to set the periodicity, how frequent we want to send this data. And the receiver IP is key here because this is where we are going to set the IP address where we are going to receive this data. So I have basically modified this to the public IP of the newly created VM, and I have also mentioned the port number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the set of settings, and then I'm going to push it on to the IOXE device. So it's difficult maybe to get it right in the very first instance. So the first thing that we're going to check is whether the configured telemetry instance is sending the data as it should. So before we check whether the receiver is sending the data, we need to basically check whether the path is valid. So if I'm going to key in this command, the state in this command is going to basically say whether the filter and all the other settings that we have configured is in a valid state or not. So as we saw earlier, we have configured the MDT instance. We have checked whether the path is valid or not. So the other thing that we have to check, whether the network connectivity is true or not for this particular receiver. So that we can check using the command, the subscription receiver. So the state should show connected here, right? So this is going to tell us that the network device is able to establish, gRPC TCP connectivity on port 57500, and the state is connected. So at this point of time, we have everything in place that should, basically send the data, and we should receive it onto our Influx instance. So coming back to the Influx instance, so at this point we should be able to see some data in our Influx instance, so that we can verify by going to the data explorer. So how do we sort of verify whether we are starting to receive that data that we are going to send from that network device? So basically we have to select the appropriate bucket, right? And once we select the appropriate bucket, if the data is already getting received in this Influx instance, we should see that particular measurement field popping up in the Influx graphical interface. So as we know that we are going to that we are sending the 5-second CPU data, from that particular VM. So this instance is the host from which we are sending the data, in which the Telegraf instance is running, and we are going to basically send this data. So the data that we are interested in is the Cisco IOXE processes. So we also need to complete this entire tree. So we are interested in subscription called 101. So once we have selected this entire path, now we can click submit here, and we are receiving some data which is being graphed onto the instance. So this means that the configuration we have done to send the data from the network device to Influx is working, and we are good to go, and we are good to go to our turn our efforts towards Grafana now, because we will not be visualizing the data every time on the Influx instance, right? So the in the TIG stack we gave that role to Grafana. So Grafana is going to help us in plotting nice graphs, and then sort of leveraging the data that is already residing in the Influx instance. So in the next part we are going to go to our Grafana instance, and we're basically going to see how to add this Influx instance as a data source. And once we have done that, once we have established API connectivity between the Grafana and your Influx instance, so then we can go ahead and add those nice panels in the Grafana instance and take it forward. So the Grafana instance is running on port 3000. So as we did earlier, we need to first open the port, for TCP 3000. So that's what I've done here. I've gone ahead and enabled the 3000 port in the IP tables of that Ubuntu instance. The other thing that we need to know is that we have installed the Grafana package, but we have still not, started the Grafana server. So these are the set of commands that we need, to basically start and display the status of the Grafana server. So we'll go ahead and copy these commands as per the configuration guide. So we have started the Grafana server and it's running. This step is, optional if you want the Grafana server instance to be started every time the Ubuntu machine reboots. So basically you can enable this service. So this is especially important if you're going to run this in production. So now once this is done, now we should be able to access the graphical user interface of Grafana. So it will take a few minutes to load the very first time because it's going to initialize a lot of things for us. So once this is done, we'll be prompted for the username and password. So I guess the initial password is admin. So you can go ahead and choose a password of your choice the very first time. So this will enable the admin user access. So then we'll be basically brought to this beautiful homepage of Grafana. So from here, what is our task? Our task is to add the data source. So this data source that we are interested in is to basically add our Influx database instance as a database source. So we are going to come to this add data source page. So here we are going to find the Influx DB, right? So when we're going to add InfluxDB, what you need to know and essential information is that you can use two types of, query language to for Grafana to basically query our InfluxDB instance. So the InfluxQL is an, similar to SQL-like query language, and the Flux language is an advanced data scripting and query language, and this is supported in all versions, like in all 2.x versions of InfluxDB. So the support for this is still in the beta stage, but we can go ahead and use Flux because we have installed 2.3 version of InfluxDB. So these are the parameters that we would want, in order to interface with the InfluxDB. So let me go ahead and configure certain key parameters. So this is going to be localhost. So supposing that in your environment, you're going to go for a distributed sort of virtual machines or Docker containers, or however you want to deploy them, you need to key in the appropriate URL. So in authorization, we're going to use, basic authorization with credentials, and we are going to require certain access tokens once again here. So we are going to generate one more API token for our Grafana instance. So this time I'm going to name this Grafana, and then I'm going to click save. So we can go ahead and copy this particular API token and come back to our basic auth. So in basic auth, we can key in the same password. So the organization is going to be test, and the bucket that we're going to be interested in is also test, and the user that we're going to be interested in is Grafana. So let's test. I'm basically not sure about the settings, so I think this should so yeah, the data source is updated, so I think we are good to go. And if the API token is valid, so we should uh, basically the Grafana instance should be able to discover the buckets which are configured in our Influx instance. So we have now everything in order to get going with our first dashboard. So this is not going to be an in-depth video, because we have come a long way sort of initializing the entire TIG stack. So let's go through the fundamentals of Grafana in another video. But in this video, I'm just going to basically give you an overview of how we can go ahead and create a dashboard. So I have created a new dashboard. So I'm sorry. So let us name this dashboard iOS XE always on sandbox, right? So basically this is going to be only focused on the iOS XE always on sandbox. And in this dashboard, we are going to add a panel, and we are going to add a new panel here, and we are going to name this panel CPU utilization, right? So this sort of gives an overview of what we are going to visualize in this particular panel. So this is the area where you would see the graph if we choose the right query in the bottom part of the this area. So here is where we are going to key in the parameters, or basically we are going to write the Flux query language in order to for the Grafana to understand what data should I actually display in this particular graph. So I mean, what is the easy way out, right? So it shouldn't be that difficult. So I'm going to show you a very easy way in order to generate the script required, for Grafana to basically use Flux query language. So as you remember, we were seeing we were exploring the data in the data explorer, right? So once you've selected all these parameters and all the subscription, and then you click submit, and then you were able to see the data. So the Influx graphical user interface gives us a nice option to generate the query for the same graph that we're going to be seeing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically copy this entire Flux query language, and I'm going to come back here in the Grafana panel. I'm going to paste this here. So once I do this and I'm going to click anywhere, so this is going to basically plot that graph for me, and it's going to give me a legend saying, okay, what am I basically graphing? So this graph is basically going to show me the 5 seconds utilization of that iOS XE sandbox. So this is going to basically get updated at the time and option of choosing. So let me save this and apply. So here it is, our nice dashboard, and we're going to see. So here the legend is not good, right? It's going to display a very lengthy source. So let me go ahead and edit this. Let me give an override for this. So I am going to display. Okay, so I'm going to add an override property. So I'm going to choose a different display name for this. So I'm going to say 5 second CPU utilization, right? So now it's pretty clear of what we are going to display in this particular panel. the dashboard says it's of iOS XE always on sandbox, so we know which device we are going to display graphs about. And what is this particular panel all about? It's going to be about the CPU utilization. So this basically summarizes how we can leverage a data that we're going to ship. So one more thing that I left, so you can ensure that this particular panel refreshes automatically, right? So every 5 seconds this panel is going to get updated, so that gives a nice live graph of the CPU utilization of the iOS XE device. So you may wonder, why is the graph showing 0%? Maybe I think the utilization is actually 0%. So we can check that in our iOS XE instance. Show processes, CPU history. So you can see it's almost in the 0% range. So I think the graph displayed is actually correct. So that brings us to the end of this video. I hope this was informative to you in sort of helping you build a TIG stack on a cloud of your choosing, and then you can basically test the MDT from an always on sandbox, or you can also go ahead and reserve a sandbox for you, but you have to be sure it has network connectivity to the public internet. Or you can even do this in the MDT sandbox, wherein you have a dev box, and in that dev box you basically have the Docker containers which have these Telegraf, Influx and Grafana already set up. So the option is entirely yours, but I think if you do it on a bare minimum Ubuntu virtual machine, so you'll have better understanding. So let us come back to the steps of the agenda slide. I think when we completed the Grafana visualization, we pretty much completed the agendas we had for this video. So I hope this video was informative, and thank you so much for watching.